But as soon as the war began, Hitler immediately volunteered for the German army. What he really always wanted. Namely, in a Bavarian infantry regiment, despite the fact that he was a foreigner and had no military training. Hitler spent 4 years at the front, from October 1914 to October 1918. Later, he always worked diligently on the image of a veteran who went through all the horrors of trench warfare, although in reality, Hitler spent a large part of the war as a liaison in the rear, that is, in relative safety, so to speak, although this did not exclude his participation in combat. As a result, in October 1916, he was wounded by grenade fragments. And at the very end of the war, in October of 1916, he came under a British gas attack, which temporarily lost his eyesight. In addition, Hitler was awarded the Iron Cross of the First and Second Class, and was promoted to the rank of corporal. He met the Armistice of Compiègne in November 1918 in the hospital where he was staying after a gas attack. It was a real shock for him. He sincerely believed in Germany's victory and believed that the revolution that began in November 1918 was a conspiracy in the rear. A conspiracy between Marxists and Jews. The so-called stabbing in the back theory. 4 years of war in difficult and unequal conditions for Germany simply came to nothing. All efforts are in vain. Hitler is terribly disappointed. And he is full of rage against the leftist revolutionaries. At the same time, it practically equates revolutionaries, leftist revolutionaries, Marxists, and Jews. But it must be said that many Germans shared his opinion. Why? Because, despite all the economic difficulties, as of the fall of 1918, the German army was scattered over vast areas from northern Italy, France, and Belgium to Ukraine, the Don, and Finland. And there was not a single enemy soldier on German territory, which created the illusion that the war was quite successful for Germany, because it was fighting on foreign territory. In 1919, Hitler began his political career in Munich. At that time he was still serving in the German army. Not having his own home, he lived in a barracks. At the same time, Hitler later always emphasized how difficult and needy his life was. How often he suffered, starved. And he often did this in order to evoke a certain emotional reaction in poor Germans and to show them that he was just like them, a man of the people, a simple man who went through all the suffering like most Germans. Even Hitler described such episodes when he fed pet mice while living in a barracks.
There were a lot of mice in my house, and I would leave them bread crusts or bones, around which the mice would start a desperate fuss in the morning. When I woke up, I used to lie in bed with my eyes open and watch these animals play. I have been hungry a lot in my life, and I understand very well how much pleasure these crusts of bread give to hungry mice.
So, one day in 1919, when Hitler was still serving in the German army, he attended a meeting of the German Workers' Party, Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. The meeting, to be honest, was more like a hobby group, as the official party members at the time numbered just over 60. There, when he asked for the floor, he made a fiery speech about the unjust Treaty of Versailles. About the need to return to a powerful Germany, to abolish the whole unjust world that was established in the post-war period, and to punish the revolutionaries, Marxists, and Jews for the revolution they had organized. This speech was a success. As it turned out, none of the members of the German Workers' Party was such an outstanding speaker, so Hitler was offered to join the party. Which he did, after some thought. At that time, the party was led by sports journalist Karl Harrer and Anton Drexler, a locksmith who worked in a Munich railroad depot. It must be said that Hitler soon proved himself to be an extremely outstanding speaker. Despite the huge gaps in his worldview and the confusion of knowledge in his head, gleaned from different books, he read a lot, but in a chaotic and disorganized manner. And he did not receive a full education. Nevertheless, to most listeners who did not know all this, he seemed very intelligent and well-read, and the emotional fervor with which he spoke really made him believable. Like a person who speaks so confidently and emotionally cannot be lying. Hitler's speeches mostly took place in Munich beer halls. We all know that Germans have a culture of beer consumption, and they often spend their free time there. And large beer halls allowed hundreds of people to gather there, and sometimes even several thousand, such as Munich beer halls such as Sternecker Broge, Burger Brokeller, Hofbraukeller, Hofbräuhaus. Hitler quickly had the party renamed from the Workers' Party to the National Socialist Workers' Party. And in 1921, he gradually removed Harrer and Drexler from the leadership. And he was made the leader of the party because he was the most popular politician in the party. The National Socialists needed him because people really went to his speeches, listened to his speeches, and no one could ignite the audience with his speech. And as a result, it was Hitler who became the leader of the new party. At the same time, Harrer and Drexler accused him of delusions of grandeur. And even in provocative activities. But, being on the sidelines of political life, they ended their lives in complete oblivion. Harrer died at the age of 35, apparently of sudden cardiac arrest. Anton Drexler abused alcohol. And he suffered from depression. He died at the age of 57. During World War II. In February of 1920, during a speech at the Hofbräuhaus, Hitler presented the party program known as the 25 Points. The party already had the name National Socialist German Workers' Party, but was better known by the German abbreviation NSDAP Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. On April 1, 1920, this program, the 25 Points, was approved and remained unchanged until the collapse of the Nazi regime. Hitler always categorically denied making any changes to the program. In reality, however, it was a very short, undetailed program that looked more like a political propaganda manifesto. These were the simplest theses that could explain the purpose of the party in the simplest form, even to a completely uninformed German. Its full text can be easily found on the internet, and now we will quote the most important points.
First, we demand the unification of all Germans on the basis of the right of peoples to self-determination into a greater Germany. Secondly, we demand equality of the German people on an equal footing with other nations and the abolition of the provisions of the Versailles and Saint-Germain peace treaties. Thirdly, we demand the territories and lands of the colonies for the maintenance of the German people and the resettlement of the surplus population. Fourth, only those who belong to the German people can be citizens of the state. Belonging to a nation is determined by blood ties to the German nation, regardless of religious affiliation. Thus, no Jew can belong to the German people. Seventhly, we demand that the state should be primarily concerned with the employment and life of German citizens. If it is not possible to provide for the entire German population, then persons belonging to foreign nations who are not citizens of the state should be deported. Eighth, all further immigration of non-German population should be stopped. 10th, the first duty of German citizens is mental or physical labor. The activities of an individual citizen should not contradict the interests of society as a whole, taking place within its borders and for the common good.
We can say that this was the radical nationalist part of the program, followed by the socialist part. For example, the abolition of so-called non-labor income, the acquisition of industrial trusts, the involvement of workers in the distribution of profits of large enterprises. Expropriation of land from large landowners, without monetary compensation for them, and large-scale increases in pensions. Improving social security, returning to a conscript army instead of a contract army, and establishing a strong centralized government. At the same time, in 1920, at Hitler's insistence, the National Socialist Party flag was introduced, which would later become the national flag of Germany. As you know, it was a red flag with a white circle in the center and a black swastika inside the circle. Moreover, the Nazis did not call it a swastika, but a Hakenkreuz, or hooked cross. This is how Hitler explained this symbolism.
The red color symbolizes the social ideas embedded in our movement, the white color symbolizes the idea of nationalism, and the swastika symbolizes the mission of fighting for the victory of the Aryans and, at the same time, for the victory of creative labor, which has always been anti-Semitic and will remain anti-Semitic.
Gradually, the party began to gain popularity, although it was largely unknown in Bavaria and other regions of Germany at the time. It remained a provincial, relatively small party, but already in December 1920, the Nazis acquired the newspaper Völkischer Beobachter, People's Observer, which became their main printed organ for propagating their ideas. In addition, Hitler began to form so-called assault units from the fighters. In fact, it was an urgent need for him, as he constantly had conflicts with communists who came to disrupt National Socialist rallies. And these clashes often escalated into real battles with numerous wounded, traumatized, or even killed. In the fall of 1923, the NSDAP's membership reached 55,000 people. But it was still a local party, because, for example, their absolute opponents, the German Communists, numbered about 300,000. It was the second largest communist party in Europe after the Russian Bolsheviks. And it was in the fall of 1923 that Hitler decided to take decisive action, an attempted coup d'état. He was motivated by several factors, the first and foremost of which is the occupation of the Ruhr Basin by the French, Belgians, and British in 1933 due to Germany's delay in paying reparations. The German government, then headed by Wilhelm Kuno, decided only on a policy of passive resistance. He called on German workers in the Ruhr Basin to stop going to work, but as a result, the government was forced to pay workers for all this downtime. To cover these costs, Berlin was forced to simply print new banknotes. Of course, this set in motion a flywheel of hyperinflation, currency depreciation, rapid price increases, and a new economic crisis. During economic crises, left-wing political forces always become more active, and the threat of a communist coup in the country has increased. Therefore, Hitler appears as an actor who seeks to prevent the communist threat and to carry out a right-wing coup. Benito Mussolini's fascist march on Rome in 1922 was a source of inspiration for Hitler. We recently discussed this on the Real Fascism stream. Exactly 1 year passed since those events, and Hitler tried to repeat what Mussolini had done in Italy. Interestingly enough, in Italy, the Nazis marched mainly from north to south, from Milan to Rome. In Germany, the Nazi march was planned in the opposite direction, from south to north, from Munich to Berlin. This is because the so-called Bierputsch, which began with a rally in a Munich beer hall on November 8–9, 1923, was poorly organized. Its leaders acted uncoordinated, and they did not reach Berlin with this march, and did not even leave Munich. Because at Odeonsplatz, a firefight with the police and army ensued, and the Nazi demonstration was suppressed. Hitler hid for 2 days in the apartment of one of his friends, but then he was discovered and arrested. By the way, it was then, perhaps for the first time in his life, that he talked about the possibility of committing suicide. But he did not commit suicide, and some of his fellow party members felt that they had to make serious efforts to prevent him from committing suicide. The trial, which took place at the beginning of the 24th year, only added to Hitler's popularity, as it created a platform for him to spread his ideas. And from this rostrum, Hitler accused the local Bavarian government and the participants in the November Revolution of 1918 of treason. As a result, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but with the possibility of early pardon. The activities of the NSDAP were banned. In total, he was imprisoned for a little over a year. In December of 1924, Hitler was released. Moreover, his entire imprisonment, he spent his time in fairly comfortable conditions, he was visited regularly. He had very good food, they brought him a lot of food. And there he had the opportunity to write his software. Until the Bierputsch in November 1923, Hitler was not aware of his role, so to speak. He considered himself, so to speak, the young drummer of the German people and bowed to the authority of such figures as Ludendorff or Hindenburg. Ludendorff himself took part in the Bierputsch. But after Hitler was released, he seriously changed his views and believed in his own unique mission. The mission of the leader is to lead Germany out of the crisis and bring it to unprecedented prosperity and global power.